Hello and welcome to Insight. Today we have with us Malavika Avinash, a very successful actor as well as the spokesperson for the Bharatiya Janata Party in Karnataka. Join us as we discuss cinema, narratives and their role in the nationalistic discourse. Malavika, it is such a pleasure to have you with us on Insight today. Welcome, and I want to immediately deep dive into all this knowledge that you have. You've worn many hats, you've been a part of a very successful actor and a part of cinema. You have also transitioned into being a very successful politician. Could you give us a brief about the kind of journey you've had?
I started out as a child. I was 8 years old when I first faced the camera. In those days cameras were different, they were not digital. And I came from a background of the arts. I am a classical dancer. So to me, expression is what I learnt as a dancer. And arts in India have a very large base on which they have transcended all these years through generations. And whether it is Bharata's Natya Shastra, whether it is Abhinavagupta, or many other texts that came later, or the idea of theatre that came from Bhasa, from Kalidasa and all of that. Therefore, expression, for me, the references were from Puranas, from Mahabharata, from Ramayana, because that is what you are taught to dance. So, effectively speaking, if I may say this, I do not know. I have not shared it earlier also. I was just thinking about it as I was driving down today, that I am perhaps an indigenous artist of cinema, which a lot of my colleagues aren't, because they have all learnt method acting and they come from modern theatre and so on and so forth. So to me, anger is when Rama kills Ravana. Sringara is when Sita looks at Rama for the first time. So my idea of acting, of expression, of Parakaya Pravesha, if one were to say that, becoming another person, is all from that indigenous, very, very Bharatiya milieu. And it is not from the West at all. So in that sense, I can proudly claim that acting began that way, and therefore I was very comfortable. Politics, I think, flowed naturally because I studied law and I had to become a politician, because all artists are political, art is also political. Because essentially art expresses what the society feels, art imitates life, and it is natural that art is political. And to me, it was just a natural extension, because I also had a legal background. If you were to ask me how it has been doing both or one of the two, it has been very difficult in the sense that there are no fixed rules or formula. You don't have a certain education to have achieved to become something. If I have to enroll in the Bar Council, I should have studied so many years of law, right? If I have to become an actor, what is it that I should have done? No one knows. Similarly, if you have to become a politician, what is it that you should have done? There is no fixed rule or formula. So, I am just finding myself in both, I guess.
You said cinema imitates real life. So what do you think has the contribution of cinema then been to the nationalistic discourse in this country?
See, one must understand that cinema is something that's come from the West to us. When I say cinema, not the idea of storytelling, right? But the tools that cinema uses, a camera, editing, sound, all of that has come from the West, right? These are not things that were invented in India. However, storytelling is something that's very, very natural to the average Indian. You see the number of people that gossip. I mean, you know that it's a very natural thing for an Indian to just
be very expressive.
Yes, to just narrate, tales. And if you were to look at it really from the artistic perspective, you've had it across the country. Kathak comes from Kathakar, We have Bhagavata Mela in South India, or Harikathe in Karnataka, where there is a storyteller who tells you the story of Rama, of Ravana, of Mahabharata, of Kurukshetra and all of that, along with music and dance and all of that, theatrics. And there is Yakshagana in coastal Karnataka, there is Kathakali in Kerala. So across the country, even Satriya to a large extent I see is a very expressive form. They may not be, perhaps the dialogues are all now edited out. Even in Kuchipudi there used to be a lot of talking. So the art forms have always been used to tell stories. For us, the tool of cinema was new, but not storytelling itself. So the first foray into cinema for India, if you look at the films we made Mirabai, you know.
Raja Harishchandra.
Yes, we made films about who we are.
Yes.
Right? But subsequently, of course, post-independence, a lot of things changed. If one were to look at it nationalistically, right, only from the perspective of this movement against the British or the invaders and all of that, I do not know, I can't, there is one Manoj Kumar in Hindi who taught us how it is to be nationalistic. Other than that, Hindi cinema, which dominates the cinematic narrative of this country, has done very little if you ask me. Where are the films about Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj? Where are the films about, even your Rani Jhansi is all, more recent. Where are the black and white films about all these great heroes of this country who fought for the freedom of this country, who fought against invaders? South India actually led the narrative. If you look at South Indian films, we made films about all these great people who fought for our freedom. There used to be a director called B.R. Pantulu, and he made a film called Veerapandiya Kattabomman. To this day, for the average man, popular cinema is popular for a reason. The average young person relates to freedom movement through the eyes of this local chieftain called Kattabomman, who fought the British, who said, I will not give you tax. Why should I pay you tax? You are not, who are you to come and rule me? So if you look at the biggest stars of South India, they're as indigenous as I am, when it comes to this whole idea of acting. There is no method acting and all of them in them. So you look at the greatest matinee idol of Andhra Pradesh, now Telangana also, because they're split. Telugu cinema, so to speak, is N.T. Ramarao. N.T. Ramarao, if you say N.T. Ramarao, the first image that comes to every South Indian's mind is that of Krishna. Because there is no one else who could act the way he did as Krishna. Right? If you say Shivaji Ganeshan, the first image that comes is of Kattabomman. And his parents didn't call him Shivaji Ganeshan, no, they called him Ganeshan. Shivaji is the name that he earned from playing Chhatrapati Shivaji in a play.
Oh, fantastic.
Yes, and he did, there is Kapalote, Tamilan, that he did so many films like that. Who was our matinee idol in Kannada? Dr. Rajkumar. Dr. Rajkumar has told us how Pulukeshi was, Immadi Pulukeshi was. How else does one's imagination work, right? By watching these guys. Or, Mayura Verma, who was the Kannada hero, the hero of this very language, of this soil, yes? Or how he played those mythological characters of Kalidasa, of Hiranyakashipu in Prahlada. So to us, these popular stars were all those who taught us who we are. So in many ways, I think South India has brought out this Bharatiyata far more effectively than Hindi cinema has. Hindi cinema is like a boiling pot of multiple cultures, right? It doesn't restrict itself so much to who we are or what the essence of this soil is. So if you ask me, we've got ignored in many ways for that, because our popular cinema has always been that.
Quite right. But what do you think are the elements that disallowed Hindi cinema to be a part of this nationalistic discourse, to answer this question of who we are?
I do not know. I fail to understand why they made a magnum opus Mughal-e-Azam and not a magnum opus Chhatrapati Shivaji. I cease to understand why they did so. Because these are people who came from West Punjab. They are people who came during partition. They should have been far more affected by invasion as well as partition than South India has been. We've not been invaded the way North India has been. We've not been oppressed for 1,000 years the way North India has been. We have been. There has been Muslim invasions in South India. Vijayanagara kingdom was destroyed by them. Yes, they went all the way up to Madurai. All that is there. But we have not faced the brunt of invasion as North India has. Yet somehow that cinema doesn't reflect it. I don't know how. It's perhaps since cinema grew in the post-Nehruvian era, And cinema, unfortunately, is not part of the art and culture of this country. Cinema, if I may tell you, is part of the information department in India. It's not in the culture ministry.
That's a revelation.
Yes, it's not in the, see how unfortunate this is. Cinema is governed by the information and broadcasting ministry. Why is it so? What is it that you are going to broadcast or inform people about through cinema? Of what government policy? Which means Nehru thought that perhaps this will be an agent for propaganda of his own government.
Do you think that's the reason?
That's a very communist idea. Yes.
Do you think that's the reason that, and you may correct me if you think I'm wrong, that politics has permeated into cinema while it's building a particular narrative?
It has been, see, just as the idea of governance. If one were to read Ram Madhavji's Hindutva paradigm, it's about Ekatma Manav Darshan propounded by Pandit Deendayal Upadhyay. What is it about? The indigenous idea of governance, right? After all, we have a recorded history of over 10,000 years, right? Saraswati civilization dates back even earlier. So, there has been governance, there has been dharma, there has been an idea of a society that is harmonious. And if you read Shanti Parva, what greater theory of governance do you need than that? How is it that we are not even made aware of the political science teacher never tells you what Shanti Parva is, from the Mahabharata. So, in many ways, these ideas that enabled the Nehruvian,
Ideology.
the Nehruvian, what do you say, influence on this country included education primarily. I think especially my generation, perhaps this generation might, at least is being exposed to the actual real history of this country. When it comes to history, we've been denied of our own history. It's so through the colonial lens. So education has been influenced by them. So has governance. It's either communism or capitalism or socialism. Why is it not from Rajdharma of Shanti Parva? So it's that, and so has been cinema or art itself. They created institutions to nurture this leftist idea, right? I won't take names, but look at the number of institutions there are in this country. If you take, for example, under the Information and Broadcasting Department, right, we have a National Films Development Corporation, we have a National Films Division, we have multiple agencies that enabled these guys to spin their narrative in the 70s and the 80s. This parallel cinema of talking to the world about how sad a civilization we are, of how, there is social oppression, there is caste, and there is poverty, and there is this and that. Why not about all the greatness that this country has been all about? Why not about the architecture? Why was there never a film made about the Madurai temple? The greatest piece of architecture ever. So in many ways these agencies were created by the Nehruvian government and subsequent Congress governments to enable these guys to keep their narrative alive. Every single artistic and cinema agency has been that right up to 2014. Maybe partly there was, during the Vajpayee Sarkar, there were attempts to sort of, reinvent, rework, to understand these agencies and to understand what they were spinning, their agenda and so on and so forth. But then it was short-lived, it was only 4 years. But I think post 2014, a simple thing like freedom of expression, right? That's what you hear all the time, freedom of expression, like it's brand new to India. This is a culture or this is a civilization which has allowed all kinds of thoughts to thrive. Believing, not believing. Yes, you can be a believer, you don't have to be a believer. You can be a believer and go to temple. You can be a believer and worship at home. You can be a believer and not be, and still be not an idol worshipper, like a Nirishwaravadi. Or you can be an idol worshipper, or you can go to a temple, or you can think it is aham brahmasmi and tattvamasi, therefore both of us embody the cosmic energy, therefore I am God, and there is no God of Charvaka and so many of them. So the jignasa of no God at all. So this is a civilization where everyone is thrived. We may be Vedic civilization predominantly, but are you saying there were no atheists? Of course they were. Show me one such person. You will be called a pagan in the West, right? If you don't believe in the Lord and all of that. So this is a civilization that has allowed every kind of expression to thrive and managed to assimilate also. Don't you have Islamic influence on music, on dance? Have we not assimilated it? There is this salamu in Kuchipudi. Why do they do it? That's not us. Ours is this namaste. Why do we do this? Because we have assimilated. Kathak has a lot of Islamic influence in it. Why is it? We have assimilated, and you are talking freedom of expression to us. So, but let me tell you, coming to the cinema itself, the censor board was censoring right up to 2014 until Jaitley ji became the information minister and made it a certifying board. It's no longer a censoring board, it's a certifying board. Who knows? And we are accused of intolerance, of not disallowing freedom of expression. Really.
But today we hear about freedom of expression being used very loosely. Cinema, OTT platforms are all coming out with under the guise of offbeat programs. Programs that might hurt religious sentiments or attacking a particular community or a particular religion or so on and so forth, or attacking the foundations of our society. How far do you think that is true and how far do you think that is right?
You see, this is all very carefully crafted. It's all well thought out, right? One must understand that somehow, because they held the domain for so many years, when I say they, I am talking of the non-nationalist. What should I call them? You can't restrict them at leftist. It's liberal, it's left, it's a whole host of them, right? They have not only held the public policy to ransom, they have held social narratives to ransom, they have also held artistic narratives to ransom. So, in many ways, the change of regime or a regime with a greater mandate, let me put it this way, right? This regime post 2014 and then the repeat of the government coming into power again in 2019 is with a massive public mandate, which scares them, because they were holding it artificially. By virtue, the king or the guy at the helm of it was in many ways their patron, right? Now, this is a government with a popular mandate. Now the fear has set in that they can't push these narratives, these pseudo narratives, and therefore I think the resistance, all this is expected. And if you ask me, freedom of expression is nobody's grandfather's, it belongs to everybody, it shall stay so. But freedom of expression also, since I studied law, I can tell you for a fact, the constitution says it comes with certain preconditions. Yes, it's not a free for all, it's not unmandated, it's not you can say what you want and in wherever you want. Yes, there are some conditions to this freedom of expression, they have to be respected. And this anti-OTTs especially, anti-Hindu, if I may say, anti-Hindu can be taken as anti-Bharatiya, right, largely. These are well thought out narratives because there is no other space now. Where do they go and speak? So they are holding OTT to ransom. They have held the government, like I said, public policy, social policy, they have held governance, they have held the artistic institutions. Now it's OTT.
But a lot of OTT platforms are also internationally backed. What sort of invested interest do they have in Bharat?
No one wants any country to be happy. That's fundamental, right? No foreign force wants another country to be happy. Why do you have so many conflicts across the world, right? so that the arms machinery keeps running, right? They can keep producing more ammo and the world can keep warring each other. Therefore, it's but obvious that this, like I said, this popular mandate has scared a lot of people. And at the editorial positions, and so it's very difficult for them to enter into popular minds, because the minds are all taken over by one man, Narendra Modi. So they are unable to grapple with it, and therefore they try all of this to poke us, I guess, and to get us to react. And people, I think today are far more aware than they were 20-30 years ago, because I for a fact can tell you that in my growing up years, 70s and the 80s, we were told that parallel cinema is serious cinema. The rest of the cinema is nonsense, And parallel cinema was what? This progressive, this, Pragati Para and all of that. What? Telling the world how poor we are.
Well, if it was the better cinema, then did it ever make money?
They didn't. They showed poverty, and but they were not poor. They only showed poverty because they were backed by government agencies. I am so glad all these NFDC and 4 or 5 of those institutions have been clubbed together now. Because what is the purpose of the government funding filmmaking? Why should the government fund filmmaking? If filmmaking has to be popular expression, why should there be a serious cinema? If it is cinema, let people watch it. If they don't like it, they won't watch it. That means you are saying something they don't agree with or they don't like.
It's also been seen, and recently has been written about it also, that cinema, OTT platforms, media is being used as a propaganda tool. We saw that during the CA riots. A lot of fake information was transferred. What do you think? Is regulation needed? Do you think that that would be an infringement of freedom of expression?
I don't know this. I think this whole medium, this social media itself, of multiple people across the world all coming together in one platform itself is very new. So initially it was all exciting, and now slowly I think we are seeing the damage that it can do. I really do not know. I don't know. I think we are all in that learning process. But one thing I can tell you, just as they hijacked a lot from the country, history, education, all of that, similarly they are attempting to hijack these platforms as well, where the agenda is driven. I think it will take, we have to respond, and we have to respond by delivering our own content. Right? I mean, who could have thought that there can be a film made about Tanaji some years ago? Right? No one even had heard that name, right? Except in RSS shakhas perhaps. No one knew that there was a great hero called Tanaji. So these are films that are finding expression, and a lot of such popular sentiment that really tells the world who we are. We are a glorious civilization. Yes, we've had our downs. I am not saying there was no casteist bias. I am not saying people were not oppressed. Yes, every society has all of those. But, I mean, like my brother-in-law very famously says, he's a very senior Swayamsevak. He very famously says in Kannada, I'll say it in Kannada. He says, "Avaru badtana hanchtare, navu shrimantike hanchtivi." We share prosperity and they share poverty, is what he says, very simplistically speaking, in every sense of the word. The prosperity of this. Why is it that no film school teaches what Bharata wrote in Natya Shastra of how a stage should be, how lighting should be, how acting should be? Why is it that no school, theatre school teaches all of this? Right? Why is it that we don't have pride? If you look at Bhasa and Kalidasa, Shakespeare came in the 16th century, they came in the 2nd and 3rd century. You speak of Greek plays, what about ours? How many of us have read those plays? So there was a sense of storytelling in us, and there was very intricate theatre. See, for example, I am a dancer. I can tell you there are many mudras, right? People who do yoga also know what mudra. Every mudra has a shloka to say how the mudra has to be used. Yes? If it's just pataka, there are 100 different ways I can use this one hasta. So why is it that all of this does not come into popular expression? Why is it that it's not taught? I think there's a time, there has been a civilizational revival of sorts that's happened in this country, right, since Ram Janmabhoomi, and now with the Kashi Vishwanath corridor. There has to be this kind of reclamation of our indigenous expression as well.
Malavika, you used a very interesting word, reclamation. We have seen a new hope where a lot of young people are reclaiming their history, reclaiming their culture, going back and seeing what they've missed out. You took the example of the Prime Minister reclaiming history with the Kashi Vishwanath corridor. However, we've also noticed that around reclamation, there's a lot of controversy. You being in the movies, I feel, would have faced this sort of controversy because you wear your ideology on your sleeve. You have reclaimed, or you hope to reclaim, the kind of nationalistic cinema that we've just spoken about. How do you navigate this sort of pressure and controversy in your profession?
You see, I exist in an environment which is full of them, right? I'm a standalone person. I wear it on my sleeve, my husband doesn't, but he's also standalone. People like us are lost in this crowd of, this drivers of leftist ideology. As an example, I'll tell you, there is a Rangayana in Mysore, in Karnataka, which has invited me to inaugurate their Natakotsava, their theatre festival. You know how much opposition there has been to it? Why? Am I not actress enough to go there? And what am I going to change there with one speech or with a few words? So, this is a crowd that speaks of intolerance to me and says award wapasi and all of that. But here they are, when it comes to their own, see, they are feeling now rattled. They are rattled. So, and what happens when your survival seems bleak? Because you've held on an artificial platform, on an artificial narrative for 70 years, right? You've lied to this country about Aryan invasion. You've lied to this country that, the greatest theatre comes from Russia, right? You've lied to this country for so many years. So here, when you are threatened with what we are and who we are coming out, because this is an oral tradition. You see, we don't have anything written. Our problem is that. Or maybe our strength is also that, right? A grandmother at home will sing a Dasara Kriti to you and explain to you what it is to live harmoniously in this society. So, we have in many ways now started this reclamation. So, obviously there is going to be opposition, but then we are not going to be bogged down by it, because they may have done a lot of breaking down and building upon illegally against the will of the people, using force, right, for 1,000 years. We aren't. We went to the Supreme Court and the Supreme Court told us to build the Ram temple. So, we are doing it now the legal way, the constitutional way. So, at best what can they do? Hyperventilate? They are welcome to.
But let me ask you a direct question. I know we are running out of time, so I'll make this my last question. But social media has played a role in defining people's characters, in defining people's reputations. When I say these controversies around your ideology that you wear on your sleeve, what are the repercussions that you have faced on social media? How has social media played a role in sort of trying to numb your voice?
I think it happens to all of us, this whole idea of discrediting a person, especially a woman, because it's easier, right, to character assassinate a woman. An unknown handle, somebody you don't know who's nameless, faceless, they can keep throwing stones at you and you receive them. Yes, you do feel let down a bit, you feel your own people aren't standing with you and all of that. But all that is untrue. Everyone is with you. It's how you perceive it and it's how you fight it. And I think we have to learn to accept it now as part of life. This whole discrediting that's going to happen. Nothing comes free. We've all seen from 2002 to 2014 where that man has traveled and how he has traveled. It's not as if, I mean, who could have faced more unwarranted and the kind of flack that was totally, not right and full of lies, right? So many narratives were spun around Modi ji till he became the Prime Minister of this country, and they continue to be, right, to this day. So you watch and learn from people like that to know when to react, what to react to, and to not react to a lot of these stories. I'll tell you a funny one. 2 days ago, there was a post on YouTube saying Avinash is dead. And Avinash showed it to me and said, "Am I dead?" So this is the length to which people go. Some other Avinash had died somewhere else. So our guys put his photograph and say he's dead. So this is the new world we are living in. You laugh it off. Yeah, it's not for us to feel perturbed or to move away from what we began to do. There are very few voices, I think, that too, voices of women. It's fashionable to be some part of some ism, no? To be, especially to be a feminist, which we are not. You and I aren't, and therefore, we are outside that. Women, you are. In fact, it's worse for us. They call us orthodox and conventional and communal and sampradayavadi and this and that and sangi and whatnot. But that's okay. That's okay. It's all for what we believe in.
But you have been in a position of power and leadership, and clearly that strength has resonated in how you've reacted to slander or these sort of controversies. What would you finally say to all these young girls, and we do have a viewership of a lot of young people who see you as an idol? What would you say to them? How do they navigate social media as a space that can be very negative and oppressive as well?
See, it's as easy or as difficult for me as it is for them, right? It's not as if we are devoid of emotions, but maybe perhaps we've grown a skin over all of it. I know a lot of girls who very vociferously used to speak and no longer speak on social media. Yes, there must be a reason for it, because people do somehow manage to find out where you stay, what you do, and if there is a regime that doesn't like who you are. There are many of our boys who were arrested during the Rami government, for speaking against Tipu Jayanti, for telling the world that Tipu Sultan was no hero, right? He was the biggest tyrant of all, and they were put behind bars for it. So girls too, many girls too. So and I know some of them have disappeared thereafter, thinking
it's not worth it.
It's not worth it. Yes. So we have to fight this battle, and we have to try and network, which we don't do, which the left ecosystem does brilliantly. I mean, they quickly, one message, in a flash, everyone is aware of it, and perhaps it's built over the years, right? It's taken them 70 long years to build it. So we are relatively new in that realm. So it will take a while for us also to network, to know each other, to stand up for each other. But I only urge one thing of people on social media, young people. Don't do what you don't like being done to you. Don't use nasty language, unparliamentary language, abusive language. You can say everything without going to court. At least that's what I've learned as a politician and lawyer, to say things that won't take you to court. Yes, you don't say things that are called unparliamentary or that are defamatory, where someone can pin you down and say, you said this about me. You can say everything without naming. You can say everything without abusing. So let's not do what we think affects us or bogs us down. That way I think half the battle is won, because we tend to do what they do. Yes, in the name of liberal, they can use abusive language very, very easily, which we can't, right? Because for them, it's a lot of social, so to speak, rights are all, it's okay for them to break them, right? Which we don't. So let's not try and be them. Let's try and construct our own narrative, and let's do it with facts, with figures, so that we can't get challenged.
I think it's true that, with facts, figures, and logic, you can probably counter anything.
Yes.
Thank you, Malavika, for being with us today. I hope I get to see you on our show again very soon. Sure. Thank you.
Thanks so much. Namaste.
Namaste. That definitely was a very candid conversation with Malavika Avinash. Clearly, the time has come for us to reclaim our indigenous arts and to resist distortions of our narratives, distortions of our history. Until next time, thank you for watching.